Good morning, everybody. We are going to get started with the December meeting of the Stony Brook University Council. We have two members en route, two council members en route. They should be here momentarily. And we also will have soon Errol Talon, if he's already on. Errol is joining us by conference, and Mayor Garant may join us by conference in a few too. So as we wait for them, we will jump around on the agenda, and once we have an official quorum, we'll do some of the resolutions. But let's call the meeting to order, and we'll do the pledge, then we'll punt the minutes and one of the resolutions, and then we'll get to the chair's report. So why don't we stand up, and Frank, please lead us.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So, briefly, Errol, thank you. I wouldn't dream of starting without you. Sorry we're missing you today. Chair's report, just a couple of items. I'm very excited that Governor Kathy Hochul was elected on Election Day. I think it's going to mean great things for our university. She's a big fan of Stony Brook. I've had specific discussions with her about what a great institution this is, and she's already demonstrated great commitment here, and we're hoping for even bigger and better things as she gets ready for her State of the State address and her budget. And from a personal, selfish perspective, we all serve at the pleasure of the governor, so if she didn't win, none of us would be here after today. So I'm just glad that we're all here, including all the gubernatorial appointees. And also, I'm sure Maury's going to cover this. I just had the pleasure of being with the governor 2 weeks ago with Maury as she announced some of the first investments from the Long Island Investment Fund, which included a project here at Stony Brook, which I'm sure Maury will mention. So it's great to have the governor's strong commitment to Stony Brook University. As I said, we're going to jump around. We're going to wait until Linda and Michael get here to approve the minutes and the resolutions. But there is one special presentation that we'd like to make now, and I don't want to keep him here for the duration of the meeting. But we want... Hello? We want to acknowledge our good friend, New York State Assemblyman Stephen Engelbright. Steve and I go back 35 years. We became friends in kindergarten. But 35 years ago, Steve and I met in county government, and he's really been a terrific friend and mentor to me, taught me all about open space preservation, brought me to things I never heard of before, like kettle holes in Setauket and kettle holes out in Southampton and East Hampton. Talked about the importance of the preservation of the Pine Barrens. And a lot of people don't realize this, but under the Pine Barrens Protection Act, hi Linda, let the record reflect Linda Arman has joined us. Under the Pine Barrens Protection Act, which preserved the Pine Barrens and designated them as core and compatible growth areas. 2 years earlier, Steve and I worked on what was called the predecessor of that bill, called the Pine Barrens Maritime Reserve Act, because Steve knew it was important to tie the preservation of open space with our surface waters. And he was a visionary back then. Everybody's talking about groundwater protection over the last few years. Steve was talking about it 35 years ago. And we tied in Pine Barrens with the headwaters of the Peconic River, as well as some other tributaries throughout the Pine Barrens. And really, I learned a lot from Steve. Steve then went on to leave the county and serve 20 years in the New York State Assembly, including the last 7 as the chairman of the Environmental Conservation Committee, where he did an amazing job doing groundbreaking environmental legislation. Closer to home, Steve's an alum of Stony Brook and also a professor. A geologist by training, but a passionate advocate for both the environmental world and the academic and educational world here in Suffolk County, and primarily here at Stony Brook. And so, Steve, we're just excited to offer you and award you the Stony Brook Medal of Honor, which is one of the few awards the council can actually do, and not too many have been given out over the last 55 or 57 years. And so we're honored to do that, and I want to call you up in a minute, but first I want to let Maury also say a few words about you, and then we'd love for you to come up, receive the award, and say a few words.
So Kevin has spoken very eloquently about your impact, but I want to add Stony Brook's deep appreciation for your many years as both a legislator and a faculty member at Stony Brook. Your impact here at Stony Brook and your work on behalf of our programs in SOMAS, at Flax Pond, at the Cancer Center, at our Student Health Center, in your legislative role, have really left an impact throughout the institution. Of course, on Long Island, we will feel your impact for many years to come. Not only your work on the Pine Barrens, but also fighting for the Clean Air, Clean Water, and Green Jobs Bond Act, and of course, the sponsor of the groundbreaking Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So we are so grateful for everything you've done for us, both as a legislator and as a faculty member for our community, and for your many years of support of Stony Brook. Thank you.
Steve Eichelberg. Steve, another dear friend of yours,
Hold on.
Chris, wants to say
I got to
something.
just say, I met Steve in 1994. I was managing a state senate campaign, and we met on that train platform right out there. I was managing a very doomed state senate campaign. You were running for your first re-election as assemblyman, and we've known each other ever since. I've always considered you one of the people who care the most about this region and our community. I live in this community. I've lived in this community for most of the last 25 years, and you have always been a great leader, a mentor to myself, to my wife, who serves and carries on a lot of the legacy that you started in the Suffolk County Legislature. I know how much you care about this particular institution. It is something that you have fought hard for and brought money home to, and resources that were needed here. You have been a fantastic friend to the university, and a fantastic friend and leader for the three villages, and congratulate you on this medal today.
And now, Frank?
Yeah, I would like to add a different aspect of it, because my life started in county government, working as the director of the Office for the Aging, and worked in that department for many years. And it was this gentleman right here who advocated so hard for senior citizens across the state at a time that many of the services in health and human services didn't exist. The need, you talk about a visionary in the environment. He was also a visionary for services to protect the elderly at a time that he had to fight for it. And he did, and we appreciate that. So thank you.
Very good. Frank, you're reminding me, and I don't think I mentioned it, before Steve was chairman of the NCON committee, he was chair of the Aging Committee. Is that correct?
Correct.
So huge impacts not only on our natural environment, but our greatest assets, which are the architects of our community, our senior citizens. So Steve Engelbright, come on up. Let us invite you to the board. Do we have a photo here? Thank you. More, get in the middle here, Steve. Chris, come on, guys, friends, Linda, come on, get it. Great, thank you.
Oh my.
So
We
Steve,
hope to see you wearing it
Thank you,
everywhere.
the floor is yours, Steve.
Just walk around.
I will. Oh my. I thought I was coming here to be grabbed by the ankles and shaken upside down until all the money fell out.
Is that an option?
There's still a few days left, and that's still an option. This is a great honor, and I thank you all. I'm really greatly amazed and honored. Thank you so much. Let me just reflect for a minute on the time that the privilege of being a representative for this great institution. When I was first elected, Saul Weapon was the speaker. Dinosaurs still roamed the earth. And I had the privilege of being able to bring home money to create a new student activity center. That's where the SAC money came from. The original $12 million was my first year. So it does matter to have representation, because that's now the heart of the campus, and or at least for the students, one of the most important things. Fast forward this year, I had the privilege of working with this extraordinary vice president to help the, speaking of shaking upside down, to bring the speaker here for a commitment to the Student Health and Wellness Center. Again, to touch every student possible on campus. And so those are sort of bookends on major projects, but along the way, many other things. So let me just say, as I stand back and look at those years, the most important contribution probably that I've made here is the sewer plant on the corner of the campus. When the university was first being envisioned, as I understand it, I wasn't a part of those discussions, but as I understand it, the university said, "What would you like us to do?" to the local power brokers of the day. And they said, "Well, we'd like you to build a sewer line from the campus to our sewer district number 1, which was in Port Jefferson. It was established in the first few years of the last century." Why? Well, you'll lower the costs of everybody in the sewer district by having this giant new user. Oh, okay. You sure you don't want us to build something on campus? No. We just want you to build the sewer line. All right. So the sewer line would break from time to time in the years that followed, and there would be something like a geyser of oil, only it wasn't oil. And various politicians in the near neighborhood thought that this was a great thing to attack the university and divide the community from the university about. So at the time that I first ran, the gentleman who I ran against literally campaigned against the campus when he ran for a local office. And the community was being incrementally alienated from the campus. I thought that was pretty ridiculous. The sewer plant needed to be built on campus. It was pretty obvious. And so I advocated for that. I was fortunate to be elected, and we built that sewer plant. And incrementally, we have walked back the anxiety and uncertainty and anger between campus and community. That, I would say, is my greatest contribution. Because today, the campus is well regarded. It has a lot to do, by the way, with the leadership that we've had. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to all of you for helping to make that sense of place complete and whole and not divided. And it's really important because, let me just take the long view of history for a moment.
the founder of Setauket, Richard Woodhull, came to Setauket, which is the original settlement in Brookhaven Town, in 1655. He was an original settler in Southold, the South Holding, if you will, of New Haven. It was all about religion. But he sought tolerance and intellectual freedom. He wasn't a rebel, but he did come to Setauket seeking tolerance. How wonderful that this university is here, a place of tolerance, an example of freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. The mission of our entire nation depends upon those freedoms, and the continuity between the founding of the community that surrounds the university and the work that you do and the work that this university does to further the tradition of tolerance is exciting to me, to reflect on that. And it should be something that all of you feel good about, because you are furthering that tradition that goes back to the beginnings of our nation. Public higher education is the greatest invention of the American experience, and you're a part of that here. So thank you so very much for your work. Thank you for this great honor. Thank
We wish you well.
you.
And
Thank you.
and enjoy the holidays.
Thank you.
And your new bride. Steve just recently got married. So a new life just beginning. So Albany may be ending, but a new life here at home beginning. So we wish you well.
Thank you. Thank
And
you all.
remember,
Happy holidays.
we're going to try to get Governor Hochul to keep you involved. I told you that, and so we'll figure that out.
Thank you.
All right, Steve. Thanks so much.
Have a wonderful holiday. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now that Linda's here and we still have Errol on the phone, can I go to the minutes and the other resolution?
Let me see if I can reach Marco. I mean,
She has
yes,
to get
do
back.
I?
Okay, so then let's go to Maury's president's report.
Yes, I'll start, and then if we get our quorum on the phone, we'll pause.
Very good, very good.
But the first thing I should probably cover is that the SUNY system has a new chancellor. If you didn't see the announcement, it is former U.S. Secretary John B. King Jr. He is a Brooklyn native, the state's first Black and Puerto Rican chancellor. He has degrees from Harvard, Yale, and Columbia. His personal history is fascinating, and you should definitely read some of the articles about him. He was orphaned when he was 12, and he gives credit to a public school educator who kept him on track. And he says, without exaggerating, kept him from either going to jail or actually dying. So gives enormous credit to education, to his success. He is a descendant of an enslaved family, and in fact, his great-grandfather, who was enslaved in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and it's a cabin where he and his mother and his siblings, the great-grandfather, was enslaved, and it's still standing. So this is very, much a part of who John King is. He will begin officially in January, but he's actually already been actively involved. I've already had 2 great phone conversations with him, and I'm really excited about his support for Stony Brook. He's an incredibly accomplished individual with an amazing career. Just a few highlights. He led the U.S. Department of Education during a portion of Obama's presidency. Prior to joining the Department of Education, he was the New York State Education Commissioner from 2011 to 2014, and he's more recently been serving as the president and CEO of Education Trust, which is a nonprofit that is focused on equitable academic achievement at all levels of education, and very much part of why he knows Stony Brook and is so excited about the work that we do here. So really looking forward to his leadership.
That's great.
On flagship, we are of course thrilled with the governor's designation of that and for her support. She had essentially said flagship, number of other things in SUNY she was very focused on, and said, okay, over the next year, we need a plan, right? So we've been working on that plan. One of the things she asked was that Buffalo and Stony Brook be able to at least double their federally sponsored research. And so the plan we've been working on for the year is the one that would enable us to achieve the ambitions that she has rhetorically set forth. That's going to require a significant increase in support. You don't just snap your fingers and say, oh, we need to have twice as much federally sponsored research. Oh, and it comes raining down from the skies. No, there's a correlation between the amount of sponsored research your faculty are bringing in and the number of faculty you have, the quality of labs you can provide for them, the quality of the equipment that you can provide for them to do their work. And so our plan, which asks for significant increases in operating aid, flexibility if needed in tuition, and fees that support a research university, flexibility in a lot of the ways that we interact with SUNY that give us the flexibility to be able to act quickly and move on opportunities, to be able to innovate. So we have put all this together, shared this collaboratively with SUNY. They will be putting it into their documents that are a response to the governor's request in her last State of the State. You all might be, and certainly I was quite surprised, and I can thank the provost for sort of bringing this to my attention. If you go through the top 10 most populous states in the US, there is only one that does not have a top 25 ranked public institution, and that is New York. Many of them have many, California being the most obvious example. And what this speaks to is decades of a lack of investment from New York State in higher education. It's a piece of New York being late to the game, right? Most states had a broad public higher education system for at least a century and a half, if not longer. So New York's is both young and then underinvested in. So we've done everything we can do on this campus to maintain excellence in the last years of constrained budgets. We have cut our expenses. We have found ways to operate more efficiently. We have done what we can to increase revenue. But when neither state operating aid nor tuition are increasing, there's only so much you can do. You cannot year after year after year after year cut your way to excellence. So we've put together a plan for what it would take to grow our faculty, to both renovate classroom and research space that we have, but actually to expand upon that and grow that, because if we actually are able to grow our faculty, we would need more square footage for them to be working in. And all of that is, of course, also linked to growing educational opportunities that meet the needs of New York State. The data shows that in New York State, the talent pool that this state needs for job generation over the next 10 years is not at all being met by the number of college awardees and degrees that are being granted by New York schools. So we need schools like Stony Brook to have greater capacity to be able to do that work. So as I think you all know, and if you were to walk around this campus, you would figure it out pretty quickly. One of our biggest problems is a crumbling infrastructure, $2 billion in deferred maintenance. A campus, as you look at the photographs, it's a good example, that was almost entirely built in that first decade, starting in 1963 into the early 1970s, and it's all failing on us at exactly the same moment, right? And it doesn't support modern science, and that is one of our biggest limiters in the work that we can do here. So we need capital support, we need operating aid, we need flexibility in research and tuition, and we need flexibility in how we are managed. And we're excited about these possibilities. We are cautiously hopeful that next year's budget will set us on the right course around those issues. Before I move forward, do we have a quorum?
We cannot reach our quorum maker.
Okay, I'll keep
So
going.
I think, yeah,
As you
so
keep
I think
smiling and dialing.
smiling and
Traffic
dialing,
was
but
atrocious on.
5 is a quorum, so we have 4, and we have Errol on the phone.
we have 10 members.
6.
5 should be a quorum, though, because the student member, does their vote count?
It's a voting member.
I stand corrected.
Yes, sir.
You did that so
But-
nicely.
I knew we had 9, so I'm thinking, all right, easy arithmetic. 5 of 9 is good, but plus the student member.
And Michael, I think it's just 6 now.
Michael and I are always late because we live the furthest away.
The question is whether Michael and Errol will be in the room at the same time.
I got
I
you.
had Margot queued up, but we can't reach her.
Got it. So we'll wait for either Michael or Margot, or
You'll let us know.
you'll let us know
And we can always take a vote and ratify it
Email.
in an email.
a different way.
Okay.
All right.
So I will continue.
Maury will continue, but you'll interrupt us in case you get her on
I
the phone.
definitely will.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
And we
So
appreciate that.
one of the exciting things over the last year is the creation of the Presidential Innovation and Excellence Fund. I want to highlight the ways that we are using this money, but let me first say that this is a $75 million philanthropic fund that was created by a $50 million grant from the Simons Foundation, 25 of which was matching. We raised the 25 million in other funds from a large number of donors who were supportive. And that $75 million was all intended to give us opportunities to invest in opportunities to move quickly when our faculty had, chances in front of them where they needed institutional support. And for us to invest in big ideas that were going to make us better situated to be able to attract future federal support in research areas. So one of the areas that we have spent a lot of this money on has been our bid for the Governor's Island competition. So that's been enormously supportive in helping us pay for the architects that were part of designing the architectural plans for the island, the consultants that have helped us, and so forth. So that has been enormously helpful. We have also been investing PI funds in some of Stony Brook's current areas of strength that we think are areas we need to be growing our research footprint in. So climate science, clean energy, quantum information science technology. And as other great ideas come forward from our faculty, and certainly there are conversations early on around aging, artificial intelligence, cancer, addiction, drug discovery, among others. So we'll be announcing other areas of investment. In quantum, this has helped us leverage additional money from the state, and this is what Kevin was referring to earlier. From the Long Island Investment Fund, we received from the state $6.5 million, and these match an investment that we've made as a campus, mostly out of the PI funds, of $12 million. And this is to help build out the quantum network and allow us to continue doing the experimentation around the quantum network and quantum communications over distance, which is all very exciting. It's also allowed us to recruit some faculty that otherwise we probably couldn't afford to recruit here. Nobel Prize winning physicist Barry Barish and Yvette Bahar, who will be the new director and chair of the Laufer Center for Physical and Quantitative Biology. On Governor's Island, we've continued to progress in the process, and we have been told by the city that they are expecting to make their final choice and make an announcement by mid-April. We remain deeply engaged in all the efforts to win this competition. We have an incredible set of partners, and we are already thinking through how we would manage the changes necessary should we be successful in our quest to establish the New York Climate Exchange. So we will certainly keep you posted. So that is it for my report. Happy to take some questions.
Do we have people on the phone yet, or can we ask Maury questions?
Margot is phoneable, so I can put her on the minute we're ready.
why don't we do it?
Yeah, just so
we
she
don't
stays
Yeah.
home.
on timing. All right. So the reason we want Margot on the phone is so that we can take a vote on a naming resolution.
Yep.
Okay.
But we'll do,
And the
we'll also
minutes
do the
too, right?
minutes. Yeah,
And then we'll do the minutes.
And
And then we'll do questions.
I think we need a resolution for Steve Engelbright's award as well.
Hi there.
We already gave it to him.
I know.
We got
That's right.
it, we can vote now. Hey, Steve, can you get the back?
Come back, Steve.
Understand. Okay. Margot is on the phone.
Excellent.
Hi,
Why don't
Margo.
you do minutes first?
Hi guys,
Hi,
Margo.
Hey, Mayor, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. So we're gonna get to, we got 3 things to approve, and then we'll let you go.
You got it.
The first item is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of October 3rd, 2022. Chris Hahn moves them, Linda seconds them. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I have to abstain, Kevin. I wasn't there.
Okay, but Errol was a yes, so thank you, Errol, and got note Margot's abstention. So the minutes are approved. Then next item, I'll just do this, it's easier than, Maury, I'll ask you to tee up
Yep.
the other one. We just gave Steve Engelbright the Stony Brook University Council Medal of Honor for his long-standing
God.
commitment to the university. And so need a resolution for that by Frank Trotter. I will second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, got it. Nobody's opposed. The motion carries. And we have one name and resolution for the Dubin Family Indoor Training Center. Who wants to tee that up for us?
I will tee it up. All right. So one of the primary responsibilities of the council is to name structures and grounds. So following your vote, the naming resolution would then go to the SUNY Board of Trustees for final approval. Right. So that's the process. Glenn Dubin and Dr. Even Anderson Dubin have been generous decades to Stony Brook for over a decade. Glenn was a student here in the 1970s and played on Stony Brook's earliest football team. Their gift to fund the construction of Stony Brook's state-of-the-art strength and conditioning center in the past, this one's already been named, has been a boon to our athletes. And they have now made a donation in support of the new indoor training center, and that has allowed our student athletes to train year-round and expands our ability to also work with local community groups. So this has been a great addition to our campus. We would like your approval to name this the Dubin Family Indoor Training Center.
Got it. So I will move that. Is there a second?
Sure.
Second.
By Chris. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then nobody is opposed. The naming resolution is approved. And so all 3 items that we needed votes on for this meeting are completed. Errol, we thank you for your patience, and Mayor Grant, thank you for participating. And we wish you both a very happy holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you both at the February meeting.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys. We're going to continue to pause Maury's President's report and questions, because the norm of the day is we're jumping all around on the agenda. And but we want to be sensitive to a prior commitment that
Yes.
our new Dean of the School of Medicine, Peter Igarashi, has. And
Yep,
so,
that'd be great.
Maury, do you want to introduce your dean?
I would
And,
be happy to.
we'll
This
have him
is
go.
another opportunity for us to bring one of our deans to the council to keep you informed on what we are doing and where we are going academically. Dr. Igarashi is our newest dean. He began in September as the dean of the Renaissance School of Medicine, and we've asked him to give us his, initial sense of the vision of the school. A nationally recognized nephrologist, a physician scientist, a medical educator, and innovator. He came to us from Minnesota Medical School, where he was the head of the Department of Medicine. While there, among many other things, he increased NIH funding to the institution by 60%. An active NIH-funded physician scientist himself with research interest in polycystic kidney disease, transcriptional regulation, epigenetics, and kidney development. And in his career, he has received more than $25 million in NIH grant support. Prior to his work at Minnesota, he was chief of the Division of Nephrology and the founding director of the O'Brien Kidney Research Core Center at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. Peter earned his MD from the UCLA School of Medicine, completed an internal medicine residency at the University of California Davis Medical Center. He then moved on to Yale, where he completed a nephrology fellowship and began his academic career in medicine. So, Dr. Igarashi, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, President McInnes, and thank you very much for inviting me to meet with you this morning. This is my 3-month anniversary. I started on September 12th, and I've been here for exactly 3 months, and it has been a blast. I tell people who ask from the outside what it's like being dean, and I tell them it's been a blast. And very optimistic about the future of the Renaissance School of Medicine, which has the very best name of any medical school in the country, for sure. So, just a little bit of background. I was born and raised in public education, and I am a very fervent advocate for public higher education. Was at UC Riverside, UCLA, and UC Davis. Aside from about a 15-year, so seems like 15 minutes, 15-year sojourn at Yale. I've been in public institutions at University of Texas, Minnesota, and now at Stony Brook. Also very committed to the safety net mission of Stony Brook Medicine. When I was in Dallas, I had a very close affiliation with Parkland Hospital, which some of you may know is a well-known safety net hospital in Dallas, Texas. The reason I came here is because of a number of factors. First of all, my wife and I spent 15 years of our lives in the Northeast, and it's really great to be back in the Northeast. We were on the other side of the mini pond, but it's similar but different, from Connecticut here. We're really enjoying it. But really more importantly is the opportunity at the School of Medicine to really elevate both the clinical, education, research, and community service missions of the medical school, provided by the really visionary leadership that has arrived here over the last several years. The alignment between the medical school, all the health science schools, really the mother university, if you will, and the hospital and the health system, I think is really very powerful for the future of the medical school as well as the other health science colleges. And then, as you've just heard from President McInnes, a major opportunity to increase research funding at the medical school, but more importantly, to integrate research with the clinical enterprise as well as with the educational and community service missions of the medical school and of the larger university. And I could go on into detail about what particular areas and tactics could be used for that if there's time, but just suffice to say, there's plenty of opportunity. The last thing I would mention is that another passion of mine is in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I lived in Minneapolis when George Floyd was murdered at the beginning of the pandemic. And that has been a transformative event, not only for the Twin Cities of Minnesota, but it sparked a worldwide movement for racial and social justice that persists to this day. And that is actually very heartening to see. Renaissance School of Medicine, in many ways, has made major advances in this area, even before George Floyd's murder, and those have only been accelerated in the recent 2.5 years. Just as one point of data, this year's incoming class for the medical school first-year class is 18% underrepresented medicine, which is the highest percentage it has ever been in the school's history. And so our goal is to continue to make the School of Medicine a diverse community, a welcoming community for all of our stakeholders, our faculty, staff, students, as well as our community. And I look forward to working with all of you in these areas. So thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
I'd be happy to take any questions if you have.
Thank you. I know you got a train, I think, to catch, so that's fine, but does any council members have any questions for our new dean? No? Well, keep up the great work, and we look forward to hearing a future presentation from you after a couple of years, and we want to know if it's still a blast.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Hey, so let the record reflect that we've been joined by Councilmember Michael Smith. Michael, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well, thanks.
Good, thank you. So we're going to go now. Michael, we've been jumping around on the agenda a bit. We're going to go back to Maury's, the president's report. Did you finish your report?
Finished the report, so I guess the question would be, any questions?
Great, and I had one. So it's startling that, the top 10, populous states all have a top 25 school, and New York doesn't. So what number are we estimated, and what steps do we need to take to increase from whatever number we are to the top 25?
So this year, Stony Brook had its highest ranking ever, which was 31.
Okay, so we're
Right.
6 behind.
So we're 6 behind, getting into the top 25. I have, and we can spend a lot of time talking about rankings, which we won't do. They're all very imperfect. The one that people pay the most attention to is U.S. News and World Report, which is a set of algorithms that change and adjust all the time. And so you can go up and down a gazillion spots and nothing's changed about your institution, right? But with their current algorithm, there are many things in there that are based on money, right? So a big chunk is the amount of money you spend per student. We don't do well on that. Some of that is a measure of the resources that your institution has available to serve students, right? We now have a 19-to-1 faculty-student ratio, student-faculty ratio. You'd like, as a public institution, to be somewhere, a dream would be 15-to-1, healthy would be 17-to-1, right? And while that doesn't sound like much, that's only 2, across 26,000 students, that's a lot of faculty, right? And what has happened as our resources have constrained is we've had to not refill positions when people leave us. So from our height, we're down about 100 faculty. So if we had more resources, I have no doubt our rankings would rise.
Got it.
That is a piece of it. We always want to remain focused, though, on the things we care most about. And a big part of those rankings is also about the graduations rate of your students, right? And part of the reasons why Stony Brook has increased in the rankings is because our graduation rates are doing better. But we still have work to do there. And again, a lot of that is about resources. If we could both hire more advisors to support our students and have more faculty to support our students, that would help with our graduation rates. And if we had more money to help support them financially, because we have an unusually high percentage of students who are Pell eligible and lower income. And sometimes it's $500 here, $1,500 there that can be the difference between their dropping out of school and their continuing in school. So on something we care an enormous amount about, and that is the education we are providing and the support we are providing for our students to graduate, I have no doubt our rankings would improve in that space, and it would make a difference in the rankings as well.
And do research dollars count too?
Not in U.S. News and World Report, but in many of the other rankings.
Got it.
Like, so those international rankings, when you see where we stand internationally, that's all about federal support and the citations and awards that your faculty win.
Got it.
And that is a place where we've also been slipping. So,
Without getting into the politics of it, I know a lot of the Ivy Leagues are withdrawing from the U.S. News and World
for law
Report,
school
right?
rankings,
Do
yep.
we actually pay for the privilege of being ranked by U.S. News and World Report? How can a university withdraw from that ranking?
You just don't give them data,
Oh, is that it? Got it.
right? And it's a statement about what you think about those rankings. And so there is, for many years, a lot of pressure on U.S. News and World Report that they are using in their algorithms things that are sometimes contrary to the mission of higher education. And that's essentially the statement that the top law schools are saying, right? Because some of the law school rankings are things like, how much are your students making the first year out of law school? So if you want to go clerk, if you want to go do public service work, you know, if you want to serve your community as opposed to go to corporate law, then you're being discounted, right? You're being penalized for that, right? And that's just one example of many of the rankings that are in that. The really high priority that law rankings have put on your LSAT score is another proxy for wealth. So just like the SAT, the more money you have for LSAT prep, right, the better you're going to do on that test.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Just a quick question, because I know for a couple of years I gave to a Finish in 4 fund. Does that fund still exist?
It does.
Okay.
We need a lot more for it.
I was gonna say, yeah.
But
so
we do have mechanisms where our students can come to us
for those little
for those
dollars,
little
right?
things. I don't know, you want to say a word about it, Rick, because you know that
well,
fund.
one with Finish in 4, so that has been utilized as a helpful tool, particularly when somebody would be adding an extra year onto their graduation timeline by giving them money to finish a summer course.
Right.
If you finish by summer, you're still counted in these, so that's been a huge help. The other fund we have is the Student Emergency Support Fund, and that is used particularly not for tuition or tuition and fees, but it is used, for example, if a student's car breaks down and they say, I need $500 for repair, and if I don't have that money, I can't go to school.
Right.
That's where we fill in resources. So we give on average about $1,000 to a student with that request, and that's been a healthy amount of money we've done from generous donations from donors as well as through Giving Day and other areas. But that is a well-used resource by our students.
All right, I'll talk to you offline on that.
Great, thanks.
Great. Any other questions for more?
Yeah, you mentioned it about new construction or renovation, and we've talked at the council meeting, particularly at budget time, when we talk about how much money goes into renovation and how it would be more efficient to new construction. Is that something you think we'll be able to move towards?
Thank you for that question.
We've
We've been working very hard with the SUNY University Construction Fund, the State University Construction Fund, to help them see that difference. Now, part of the challenge has been for many, many years, all of the money came out of the legislature marked only for renovation, right? But under Governor Hochul's budget last year, there was more money made available for new construction. A good example for us is our chemistry building. Totally not supporting the needs of our modern scientists. Every system failing. To renovate it and to deal with everything that you need for swing space, right? You got to take people out and put them somewhere and then move them back in. Total project cost to do all of that, $550 million. Total project cost to make chemistry a habitable building for activities that are not science, classes, office space, but not research, making it swing space for future projects, right? And building an entirely new chemistry building, $380 million. $170 million less of New York State money, but it has to be able to support new construction. So the state's been talking with us, the construction fund. I think they want to support that approach. They've got to figure out where they can get the right flavors of money to spend.
So there is hope.
There's hope. But we need it project after project after project, because for so many of our buildings, we could maybe not save $150 million, but spend about the same, but end up with a building that is energy efficient, that is moving the state forward on its energy and climate goals. Whereas if we renovate it, we're not making that kind of progress. Like, you just can't turn many of these old buildings into the kind of energy efficient buildings we want them to be for the state. So more conversations to come, I'm sure.
Thank you.
It is a good question. I shared this with Judy. I spoke with the head of the SUNY Construction Fund in the fall, and they realize that, like the formulas are a disincentive
Yeah.
to create and build new. But he also said every university and every SUNY has also realized this. And so the funds that were allocated that would allow for some of this flexibility is just inundated, because just like the example Maury shared with us on the chemistry building, almost every school has an example like that. And so they realize they need to change things. So, at least we're having the arguments now. And, again, it's just, stunning, the fact that it could be $100 million plus more to renovate when we could build new and use it as swing space. It just doesn't sound like common sense.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
And I will just point out that in the SUNY system, by the numbers from the state construction fund, we have $2 billion in deferred maintenance. The next closest campus is Buffalo at $600 million. So, and then all the others drop off to very, very little. So the difference in scale, in large part due to the fact that we had this, an entire campus built in the same 10-year period, and it's all failing, right? That's the big piece of it. And there haven't been the investments along the way to keep it up.
Well, at least it's getting a little more robust in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Good progress.
That's a good
We
way
are
of saying
hopeful.
it. Good way of saying it, Frank. Okay, any other questions for Maury? Or no? I meant to mention it, but we were rushing through in my report. In your folders, there is a new handbook for council members. And I told you, for like the last 13 years, I go, there's this annual conference of trustees, I go for like 14 hours for just all the meat and potatoes, and then there's a lot of downtime, so I always leave right after that. But I had participated on a committee with 5 other SUNY chairs to look at the old handbook, which was outdated and hadn't been done since like the 80s. And I know we jokingly say, oh, we name buildings, or we approve vehicle and traffic laws on campus. But there's actually a lot of different things in here that we do and we're supposed to do. Take a look at it. We got rid of some of the things we never did, and none of the other councils did. Certain things we couldn't change because we are created by state law. But take a look at there. It's basically, it sets forth our roles and responsibilities. So if you have any questions, you could ask me in February. And when Steve Engelbright was speaking, he's always great because you always learn something from him. He always brings a historical perspective to it.
The teacher.
I had no idea.
Right, but how great was it when he was talking about Setauket being an area, where the founders, it was all about tolerance. And I know we teach that and try to instill that in all our students. And I was just curious, Rick, I'm looking at you. Have things been good on campus? Do our students really buy into that? And you see some crazy things happening on college campuses throughout the country, but by and large, is that something that's not only preached but practiced?
Yeah, so I know we talked a lot around the COVID years when I think people were in hibernation, and now that people have come back, and I think we're truly back to the community setting we once were pre-COVID. I always say this about, and this is why I think we all love working at Stony Brook, we don't just talk about diversity, we live it every day. And I think that's just because when you walk around the campus, you walk into Starbucks, you walk into a lounge, everyone's interacting with everybody. I think, and that's part of what we want to do. So to me, there's a two-part to it. You want to build identity within the people you bring to campus, because people need our international students, LGBTQ students. We want to find pockets where they find identity for themselves and find out who they are, but then get to a point where you are exchanging, interacting both in the classroom setting and outside. And I think that's been a big part of our focus. A lot around even space renovation. You look at the Unity Cultural Center, for example. You look at the lounges. Other spaces that we've tried to build and make them nicer and better is part of what's I think hopefully driving the community element that we want to build. But I do think that people come here and we talk about, when we ask students, why'd you come to Stony Brook? The diversity and inclusion aspect, I think, is a top part, and the quality of education and the cost, I think, are other pieces. But that's top factors for why students come here.
Great to hear. Okay, so we're going to go back to the agenda. I think we have one other item. Maury, we have our good friend Larry Zacharies here for an enterprise risk management overview. Do you want to tee this up?
Yeah, I'll tee this up. So, we are an enormously large and complex institution. Large budget, sprawling healthcare mission, large educational mission, a very, very complex place to run. And let's just say things happen frequently, most of which we hope you never hear about. But we need to be ready for and planning for and thinking ahead about how we're going to manage and work together as an institution to deal with the complexity of an institution like this. And I was a little surprised when I got here that we did not have a centralized risk management role, right? A person in an organization that is always keeping an eye on the potential risks out there and working to make sure that we are organized to actually lower the risk that problems are going to happen and to have us ready to respond when something inevitably does, right? So we did a national search, and in May of 2021, we named Larry Zacharies as our Vice President of Enterprise Risk Management and Chief Security Officer. And in this role, Larry provides leadership, expertise, and most importantly, strategic guidance to our community on emergency management, business continuity, environmental health and safety, risk management, public safety, all come together and working together. So now, about a year and a half into his role, I thought it would be good for you to hear about his work and what he's doing.
Great. Thank you. Hi, Larry.
Thank you. Thank you. And I promise we didn't rehearse that, but that was the best tee up in the history of and you'll see it momentarily. So I want to take a page out of Sutherland Englebright's book as bookends. And I'm both a visual learner and a visual teacher. So we're going to start and end with a picture. And to President McInnes's point, prior to her arrival, this is essentially how we manage risks on campus in a very ad hoc way. You see the road is sort of twisting and turning. It's sort of an uphill elevation. And in many ways, there was a decentralized way with which things were done. We have both changed the organizational structure and the culture, which you'll see in the following slides. And we took the lessons from COVID, and really the three big takeaways were collaboration, coordination, and communication. And I think the structures that we had in place and where we are today speak directly to that. And I just remember this picture, and when we get to the end again, I think it'll, the two bookends, as Assemblyman Englebright said earlier. So traditional risk management versus enterprise risk management. In the traditional sense, risks are managed one by one, very siloed, very reactionary, more of a risk-averse culture, not necessarily looking to take those leaps. And we're in the context of our flagship status, all the things that you heard about this morning, the challenges that we have with our infrastructure, the challenges that we have with the global economy and the global market. We really need to look at things in a different way, and that's what ERM is all about. Now, as a discipline here, again, thanks to President McInnes's leadership, it is relatively new. We're 18 months in, and I'm hoping that this will become an annual report. When we get to the end, you'll get our risk register and the heat map that boards like to see. But ERM is not necessarily a new discipline. So back in the 1980s, as a product of the Treadway Commission, the Council of Sponsoring Organizations, which is a collection of both accountants and auditors, took a page out of the ways to sort of decrease fraud and financial fraud. And we've emerged today, 2004, 2017, and most recently in March of this year, with the principles of what enterprise risk management are. And what we're faced today, really, the complexity and the velocity of the risks and how things are moving so fast. And our ability to be nimble and to be able to respond to that will really dictate our success. So we took a tiered approach. Structural, philosophical, and operational. We talked about the structures, and you'll see some of those core units that were put together as a product of likes with likes. Philosophically, we have established an enterprise-wide risk tolerance and risk philosophy that has become a part of everyday culture. It's not a dirty word. It's not something that no one wants to talk about. Quite the opposite. We're proactive and we're engaging in the conversations to be able to be ahead of those risks, to anticipate them. And as the President mentioned, ERM as a value add to the strategic planning process as we are moving into our next phases of our strategic plan led by our provost. ERM is at the table, allowing those insights, thought leadership to continue, and the what-if people that aren't necessarily always invited, we're at the table, and we're there to help guide those conversations forward. And then operationally, risk identification and analysis is an ongoing, it's an iterative process. It happens all the time. We do a traditional risk assessment every year. We will continue to do so. And we've aligned up teams to be able to address those things, and that will move forward from year to year as the risks adapt and change. And as we get to the last few slides, you'll see we are very much aligned with what's happening in the global market. We're very much aligned to an exercise that SUNY did back in 2019 prior to COVID. And it's interesting to see where we are just even 3 years after that. So what is our mission? It's to provide insights and inform strategic planning to ensure enterprise resiliency. It's a word that we don't use lightly. Resiliency really means at the very, very high level, all aspects of the university, our research mission, our academic mission, our medical mission, our pursuits in the DEI area, ERM is there to help all of the individual stakeholders be able to achieve those goals as we achieve our university's mission under the President's leadership. The vision, long-term, is to become an industry leader in ERM, not just in the higher education space, but in the ERM spaces writ large. We're doing things in a much different way, not just structurally, but how we're thinking about it and how we're going about our collaboration. So the principles, really just we are setting expectations. ERM is a shared responsibility. It's not just a few people in a room. Everyone has a part, and they're all stakeholders. While our approach is systematic and structured, and yes, it's rooted in data, it has to be nimble and has to be proactive. If we think back to COVID, all the successes that we had, many of which were derived from this room and rooms just like it, we were able to shift and adapt on the fly because things were coming at us so fast and we didn't know what would, from one day to the next, what would happen. And then lastly is just proactive and honest discussion. Embracing those risks as opportunities and things that we need in order for us to achieve our mission and not being afraid to have difficult conversations. So structurally, we talked about just very quickly, these are all the units, about 375 FTEs overall. Everything from policy and compliance to mobility and parking, environmental health and safety, university police, all the way through to include enterprise risk management as a service. As we say, it's not just who we are, it's what we do. And the overarching goal is to find a way to get to the yes. Whatever that yes is in individual areas, we're shepherds for that process. And it is an iterative process. I mentioned before, it's this interwoven, complex journey, which is a continuum of mission, core, values, strategy, implementation, and analyzing that performance, and then right back to the beginning. It is cyclical, really, with no beginning and no end. And the only thing that really changes is where we're going and what are our driving factors. We talked about Governor's Island and what that looks like for the university and what the future of that looks like for the university as an anchor institution potentially. But strategy and performance and making sure that we are continually moving forward and then going back for an ongoing evaluation. We can only do that through shared governance and the ability for us to both inform and be informed. So the top level is we call our Senior Risk Advisory Council. That's ostensibly the President's cabinet. They set policy, they set objectives, and they help drive the institution forward. That middle layer, I'll call our steering committee. I don't like to use steering committee or subcommittees because that's where things go to die. But our Risk and Compliance Owners Committee is really the risk and compliance owners throughout the institution. Everything from risk management to general counsel's office, many of the people on my team across the institution. And those are the folks who are day-to-day managing those risks, but also looking forward to identifying future opportunities within the risks. And then we break it down further with what we call resiliency teams, based on the risk register and based on what we've identified as this year's objectives. And you see they span everything from finance and investment to physical plant, HR, IT, student affairs, etc. And it allows those individual content subject matter experts to manage the individual area while also reporting up to the steering committee and then ultimately briefing out the President's cabinet. And again, just like the other ones, it is an ongoing iterative process. This is a little small, which is why I have it in your handouts there, but I thought it was important to note. This just came out 2 weeks ago. It's Protiviti's top annual risks, and then a 10-year look ahead. What's interesting, there's some on the floor there too as well, Rick, if you want them. So if you look at the top risk for 2023, it's an organization's success and ability to attract and retain top talent in an ever-changing market. And if you look at that risk in 2032, it's still number one. So what's happening in the global market is also going to happen here at Stony Brook, right? We have a human capital concern and a human capital issue that everyone is dealing with. And as you go through, you'll see some of the risks that we're dealing with now don't make their way into 2032, and some change and morph and adapt. Looking at big data and having access to data now, but then what we do with that data in 2032 as it relates to privacy and IT concerns and how it morphs and changes is really, we have the microcosm of this at the university. What does it mean for the next 10 years? Again, all you have to do is open up a newspaper or check Twitter for the day. Global marketplace risks are the highest in almost a decade, right? Volatile financial markets, supply chain issues, things happening around the globe that were influencing us here at home, even prior to COVID and since COVID. Emerging technologies and innovation changes are important, but they also come with those inherent risks that I talked about related to privacy. What is the future of DEI and how it relates to ESG, environmental, societal, and governance? Not just because from a compliance perspective, but what is the university doing, and what are our partners doing as it relates to where our investments are made? What do people see? Where our values perceived from the outside? What does that mean for donors? What does it mean for the future of the university? And again, the complexity and the volatility of the overall marketplace will impact our risks here at home. So this is our 2022. We'll be doing this again in the first quarter of 2023. These are our top 10 risks. On the right, you see the trend. Obviously, the red arrow up means that these are concerns. There are still things that we have, and we look at our risks in two ways. Inherent risk is what you have by simply the thing that you're impacted by, and residual risk is where you're left after those mitigation measures that you have. So if you look at the ones that are flat for us, IT information infrastructure and cyber information security, we talked about this briefly actually at our last meeting. We've made significant investments in that space. Our information security apparatus is much better than it was just a few years ago. So while those risks are still inherent, we feel like we're in a pretty good place, both from a monitoring and a proactive standpoint as well as a reactionary standpoint. We're doing some work in the financial management system and application space, looking at our related entities and what Stony Brook as an enterprise looks like, enrollment growth, and then safety and security. Again, all things that are mitigated by what we have in place and the resources that we have. Things that we can't necessarily control, again, number one is human capital is up there. We talked about research growth and the complexity and what that means. It's an important aspiration, an important part of the mission, but with that comes additional needs for compliance reporting and the downside to that aspiration. Our physical infrastructure we talked about at length. We will continue to talk about it. $2 billion in deferred maintenance is a substantial risk, and without those investments, we're really going to be in a very difficult place. And then obviously the economic conditions and the base funding that the President mentioned will continue to do so. On the last one is our reputational and brand management, and the reason that's trending down is because of investments we've made in that area. Our marketing communications office, as well as members of my team, are working very, very much proactively to scan the horizon and see what's out there, being ahead of all those things. You mentioned what's happening on other campuses, Kevin. Luckily, we have not had some of the things that you've seen as some of the, I'll say, the hostile environments that have been other places. A lot of that is due to the work that we have, the proactive nature in which we're looking at it, and a lot of the work that's from Rick's team and others. So, based on those initiatives that we have in place, you see them there. We're doing a ton of work with our duty of care and what it looks like for our students, faculty, and staff when they're traveling domestically and abroad under the Stony Brook banner. What we can do before they go, what we can do while they're there to ensure they have the latest information, and we can see what those risks are associated with that travel. Really looking at our policies across the enterprise as we are doing it in a collective way. We are engaged with an HR and LR consultant, doing a lot of work with our laboratory management and chemical inventory management, again, as we're going through these major renovations, who's in our labs, what's happening in our labs, and how we can better position ourselves. Upgrading our service and our service model with our mobility and parking services, really investing in long-term business continuity and disaster recovery in our IT and financial spaces. I mentioned the proactive intelligence and crisis preparedness work, and then again, seeing what's happening in our spaces. So, where do we wind up? We wind up now in a much better place than where we were when we started. While off in the distance is still unclear, there's still a little fog, we don't really know what the future holds. The road is straight, it's level, there are some guardrails in place, and we're much better positioned to be able to continue to achieve those strategic objectives with a little bit of caution and the what if people sitting around the table, as I mentioned before. I know that was fast, I know we're up against time, so I open up the questions if you have, please.
Do you feel confident in the ability for the crisis planning and then the business continuity planning to bridge successfully? So, crisis hits, somebody gets notified, you get the crisis team, I'm assuming you have a crisis team that's separate, that's involved, and then how the communications and processes flow, do you feel smooth? That transition is smooth?
Yeah, I was out of all the areas, and it's the one trend that's actually moving in the positive direction, I think, because we've spent so much time. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a senior level tabletop in this room, and I really think it showed not necessarily vulnerabilities, but even as good as we are, some places where we can improve. I'm very comfortable with the cross.
If you're doing them right, they should.
Yes,
Right.
yes, exactly, and we're doing them honestly too.
Right.
So cross organization and divisional communication, and the collaboration, as I mentioned, those 3 C's. I feel very, very confident, and I think that we sort of unearthed that 2 weeks ago.
And we are even going as far as around, there are a certain number of crises that happen on many college campuses. We are creating our own communications playbooks that give us sort of draft holding statements and the communications tree of everything we want to be sure to be mindful of, just so that and I've been in one of these moments, right? And it's amazing how hard it is to get a statement out quickly and to remember all the people you need to be including in your communication. So we are creating these playbooks around a variety of different types of crises that we might face. That is student-based, faculty-based, patient-based, et cetera. So we're doing everything we can to be ready for that.
That's great, Lori.
No, that's really good, because that's the world I sit in, and it having the plans, having just the communications trees to make sure that the right communications are happening, because that's where your reputation can sink in a minute, no matter how hard you work.
Absolutely,
So,
and quickly too.
and quickly.
Right, and it's that quickly piece that
Right.
we're trying to do everything we can to be ready for.
All right, great, great presentation. Thank
Larry,
you.
great job.
Thank you, Larry.
Great photos. I have a question for you, but
Yes.
first, Maura, I want to commend you. A lot of companies, a lot of organizations, they don't know what to do with risk management, and so they usually bury them as a unit or division in like the finance department or maybe in the council's office, and just let the CFO or the general counsel deal with it. But elevating risk management to a chief, officer position, I think is really important. It says a lot. I suspect Larry is a direct report to you. Sort of. But you've elevated.
I meet with him regularly.
Right, you've elevated the issue to
Yes.
a senior officer position.
He's on cabinet.
Yeah, which is great. I think that's important. Larry, I know you spoke a little bit about it last time, but any lessons learned from the craziness going on with Suffolk County and their hack attack, and any lessons learned or things that happened there couldn't happen here because we've done A, B, and C?
So yes, and yes. I think that one, the individuals and the team that we have in place, while not disparaging Suffolk County, more in highlighting our team, there's a tremendous amount of experience and a tremendous amount of resource that I think I mentioned last time just wasn't there just a few years ago. So that's number one. Two, the work we've done to the extent that you can be appropriately insured with our cyber resiliency, and the work that we're doing with our partners, both from protection on the edge as well as being able to respond. We have a standing incident response working group. We have an information security planning council that meets regularly. So much like this, people are talking about it. We're not afraid. We're not waiting for something to happen. Over the summertime, I think I mentioned this in our last meeting, there was a 2-day-long tabletop with Verizon and some of our other cyber partners. So I'll never say
But we
we're
feel
as
good that we're
prepared
on
as-
top of things. And
I do, yeah,
very
yeah, I
good.
do.
And also, last question, I know we're a public institution, but for some of our risks, do we have insurance, or is that something, we're basically in a risk avoidance issue and we're self-insured, or is it SUNY insured, or how does that all work? Do we have some insurance for some things?
So
or-
yeah, the answer is yes for the most part. You know, being a subsidiary of a self-insured, statewide entity. But there are different areas where we have insurance that we can bolster. As a matter of fact, we've seen that with some of our utility issues on campus and some other things where we were able to be better positioned based on that. Much different than a private institution.
Right.
No, that's great.
Any
Yeah,
other-
because the insurance adds a lot of complexities too, because when you're in a crisis and the insurance kicks in, now you have to use vendors that the insurance company wants you to use, and then that really can throw all your best laid plans off. So
There goes
it's
the
good
playbook.
that you're bringing everybody in and testing that.
The advantage we have is by declaring an emergency when it's appropriate. Not that we can circumvent those processes, but we do have some expedited ways to get things done with SUNY and other agencies.
Great.
Great. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
All right. That finishes up sort of the main part of the agenda. We've got a few minutes, and since they showed up, I got to speak with them for only a minute. But I'd like to ask Hal, just with every time you turn on the news, the first thing, it's all about the triple threat of COVID, flu, and RSV. How's the hospital doing, and do we have things under control, or are we getting to a crisis point?
So,
And
thank
hopefully
you.
he's not going to say yes, yes.
No, we wanted to say yes to the first part.
But not yes.
But no.
That's the good news. I won't be saying yes. So, Kevin, we are managing, and we do have a significant number of patients that are coming in either with COVID, RSV, or influenza, but we're able to address their needs in the hospital and also in our outpatient clinics as well. We see occasionally challenges with having adequate numbers of isolation rooms, either in the adult or pediatric children's hospital, part of the university hospital, but we're managing through that. And there are some actual good trends as well. We're seeing increasing number of patients with COVID, but that's not their primary diagnosis, and that's different than ever before, and I mentioned that earlier. What does that mean? So that means that patients are coming in with a primary diagnosis. It could be a heart attack, or they may need their appendix removed or whatever, and then we test them when they come in and they're positive for COVID. As opposed to what we saw before, where they're coming in for COVID because they're in severe respiratory disease. So that means that patients are getting vaccinated in the community, or they already have had COVID and they have natural immunity. So that's one glimmer here of things being positive. What is of concern is nationally the uptick in cases of flu, RSV, and COVID are overwhelming a number of hospitals, particularly in the West. And historically, what we see is late December, January, and February is when we have the most significant uptick. We just have no idea how severe that can become. And if it becomes very severe, this isn't just a Stony Brook issue, this is a Long Island issue, a New York issue, and a regional issue. We could find ourselves with some very serious challenges. And we're monitoring that very closely. We have contingency plans in place. Honestly, I don't expect that we're going to see a repeat of 2020, but I also, learned in 2020 that you can't predict the future, because you can be very, very wrong if you try to do that when it comes to the spread of infectious diseases.
Well,
So
makes
that's
sense.
where we are.
It makes sense, and in 2020, the state played a big role in getting all the hospitals to work together to prepare for a surge. And is that playbook still around, or do the hospitals still sort of coordinate, or is there some type of sharing of information?
So it happens at two levels. One, it happens through SUNY, so we meet every 2 weeks. The leads of the 4 academic health centers across the SUNY system and the hospital CEOs get together, and that's one place where we have that conversation. And I already raised that at our last meeting, which was last Monday. The other place it happens is through Haney's and the Hospital Association, where there's coordination. And if it gets to a place where the alarm bells are going off, clearly it'll be elevated at the state level as well, no doubt about it.
Got it, great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Of course, thank you.
Any question? And Carl, since we have you here too, you've survived your, what, first 6 months as our new provost?
Yeah.
And chief academic officer? How are things going with you?
It's been great. I mean, this has been a great decision for me, and where we're going with the strategic plan is going to align really well with what President McGinnis is doing with the governor, and really good things are ahead for us.
Great. Look forward to hearing more details in the future. Does any other council member have any other issues or questions or matters they would like to raise? All right, not hearing any. Want to wish everybody a very happy and healthy and safe holiday season. Our next meeting is February 13th. Is that good right now? I think that's good, February 13th. Pre-Valentine's Day meeting. And as of right now, it'll be here unless it's decided to move, or depending upon where we are with the triple threat, it could be a virtual. So we'll wait and see. And yeah, thank you all. What last thing was? We'll just move
We
to
should say
adjourn.
happy birthday to our council member Linda Arman.
It's her birthday today. Birthday today?
Hey.
All right. All right. Happy birthday, Linda.
you.
A very nice way to end it. Thank you, Chris, for sharing. And with that,
One more trip around
Linda
the
makes a
sun.
motion to adjourn to begin the party, and Chris seconds
The
it.
party
All in
begins.
favor?
Aye.
The meeting's
Aye, thanks.
adjourned. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.